The 2015-16 Formula E Championship, or Season 2, is regarded as one of the most memorable in the series' history for a variety of reasons. For starters, it was the first year where teams could develop and design their own powertrains, or the electric motor, inverter, and gearbox system. As a result, the gap between the more competitive and less competitive teams began to grow as teams began to experiment, opting for unique designs like twin motors and even stick shifters. In addition, the max power during the race was increased from 150 up to 170 kilowatts. But another reason Season 2 is regarded so highly was its incredibly close championship battle. One of the protagonists in the apt Audi team partnered with Schaeffler to create their powertrain and retain their lineup of race winner Lucas di Grassi and Daniel Abt, while Andretti, now Amlin Andretti, re-signed Simona de Silvestro while bringing in rookie Robin Frijns. And while they attempted to make their own powertrain, some struggles in testing forced them to revert back to the generic Season 1 design. Another team sticking with the generic powertrain would be Aguri, who would continue with star driver Antonio Felix da Costa and pick up Nathaniel Berthon. Dragon Racing would also retain their solid lineup of Loic Duval and Jerome D'Ambrosio, but would become a customer team of Venturi, who would design their own powertrains and re-sign Stefan Sarrazin alongside F1 world champion Jacques Villeneuve. Virgin would partner with manufacturer DS to form DS Virgin, holding on to race winner Sam Bird while poaching the highly touted Jean-Eric Vergne away from Andretti. Another team to snatch a driver away from a rival would be Mahindra, who would take Nick Heidfeld away from Venturi and sign him alongside Bruno Senna. Next, DVTCR would retain defending drivers champion Nelson Piquet Jr. while promoting Oliver Turvey to a full race seat, while defending teams champion Renault E-Dams would keep their successful lineup of Buemi and Prost. Finally, we have Trulli. Now, Trulli originally partnered with Motomatica to develop a powertrain, attempting to run Salvador Duran and Vitantonio Liuzzi, but due to severe issues in testing, maybe even electrocuting Liuzzi, and failing to pass scrutineering for the first 2 races, the team would shut down. Rest in peace, Trulli Train. We'll never forget you. Race 1 would take place in Beijing, where Renault locked out the front row, but Heidfeld easily moved past Prost into P2, and Prost lost P3 by locking up. Simona de Silvestro planted it in the barriers, bringing out the full course yellow, and after we went back green, we saw some pretty good racing throughout the midfield, and even a cat appearance. Through the pit cycle, da Costa and Villeneuve collided, bringing out the full course yellow again. Heidfeld lost out to di Grassi and Prost, and while battling for P2, Prost rear wing collapsed, forcing him to pit late. The Dragon cars almost killed each other, and Sebastian Buemi would take home a dominant win, just as Heidfeld hung on to P3. But one thing to note was that the field was a lot more strung out now that Formula E knew how to use yellows instead of going to full safety car. Race 2 came to hot Putrajaya, Malaysia for Effie's last visit to the circuit. Buemi took a second pole in a row ahead of Sarrazin, who was sent to the Shadow Realm. The Renault would lead early as on lap 5, Turvey ate the barriers, bringing out the safety car, while Senna jammed out in his car. Buemi looked set to cruise off to another easy victory with a multiple second gap over Duval, until his car lost power and ground to a halt. His teammate Prost was brought in to make the stop immediately, hoping for a safety car, but Buemi got his car restarted and came in moments later, kinda screwing him over. A slow stop by the Dragon team meant that Loic Duval lost the lead to da Costa and di Grassi, with the app driver getting passed a lap later. With Prost's undercut, he was the leader, but had to conserve a ton of energy to make it to the end. Heidfeld made a sick drift, then tried to swat a fly in his car, and by lap 23, di Grassi had caught Prost and made it past easily, with Prost falling back. Fortunately for him, da Costa suffered a power failure similar to Buemi, but it didn't help much, as Duval, D'Ambrosio, and Frijns all got through. In the closing stages though, Duval hit a wall, breaking his suspension, and in the chaos, Frijns hit the wall, breaking his steering, allowing Sam Bird up to P3. Duval eventually stopped, and they just kinda left him there. Lucas di Grassi would claim the victory as second place D'Ambrosio would die on the final lap, allowing Bird and rookie Robin Frijns to take a podium in his second race, with a broken steering no less. This was definitely one of those classic, crazy FE races. Race 3 took place in Punta del Este, and apparently all the fly swatting forced Heidfeld to get wrist surgery, and in his place was some random dude named Oliver Rowland. The Dragons rebounded after a tough Putrajaya to take 1-2 with D'Ambrosio on pole. Bird would take P2 away from Duval off the line, but Buemi was the man to watch once again, taking P4 from di Grassi, P3 from Duval, P2 from Bird, and just a lap later, he had run down D'Ambrosio and made the pass for the race lead. The top 5 shuffled a bit the rest of the race, with Bird losing power and di Grassi moving into P2, pushing as hard as he could to catch the Renault of Buemi. In the end though, Buemi took another dominant victory, allowing him to lead the standings, although only by a point over di Grassi. Despite clearly being the fastest driver, the Brazilian's consistency kept him in check. Oh, and Piquet crashed in the last lap trying to defend P8. This basically summed up his title defense season. Happy New Year! Race 4 took the series to Buenos Aires. Villeneuve would leave the Venturi team after an unimpressive 3 races, replaced by Mike Conway, and Aguri would replace Berthon with Salvador Duran. Bird took pole as Buemi would start from the rear after spinning in quali, but the dude made up 3 places after drifting through a corner. One of my favorite moves in FE history. D'Ambrosio had to pit due to a tire rub and almost yanked out the air hose, but once again, Buemi was the driver to watch, making some breathtaking overtakes and was into the top 10 by lap 8. Da Costa was able to get P2 away from Prost, but came to a stop a few laps later, allowing Buemi to break into the top 5 as the pit stops began. But Formula E, maybe trying to avoid the confusion of last year, waited for all stops to be done, then brought out the safety car. With 13 laps to go, the field was bunched up again, to the delight of Buemi, who easily made it past Sarrazin to take P3. Di Grassi began to put the pressure on Bird for the lead, which allowed the Renault to close in, with the top three now under a blanket. Bird, though, was able to put up some great defense while saving energy, costing Di Grassi P2 to Buemi on lap 28. Bird was now under fire from the Swiss driver, but in an absolute masterclass of defensive driving, was able to hold off the charging Renault to take his first win of the season. Nevertheless, though, it was one of the most impressive drives in F1 history from Buemi. From last to second, most of that work done before a safety car. People were really beginning to wonder if he would just run away with the title this year. For the first time, Formula E visited the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez in Mexico, their first permanent circuit. D'Ambrosio would take his second pole of the year ahead of both Renaults and Audis, and there really wasn't a ton of passing early on, with the leaders mainly focused on conserving energy. Di Grassi was able to make it past Prost for P2 just before the stops, but afterwards he really put the pressure on D'Ambrosio, and used his fan boost to take the lead on lap 24. The rest of the race was characterized by an intense battle for P2 between D'Ambrosio and Buemi, making contact several times, Buemi skirming in French several times, and on lap 35 he finally had enough and sent it into turn 1, cutting the chicane in the process. As he tried to give the place back, he had Prost breathing down his neck, pushing D'Ambrosio to the outside and forcing Buemi to go even slower, now holding up an entire pack of cars. D'Ambrosio ended up cutting the turn 15 chicane and finally got the place back the next lap. All these shenanigans allowed Di Grassi to cruise off into the sunset to take the win by a substantial margin. But the battle for P2 went right down to the line with D'Ambrosio just edging out Buemi. This would turn out to be kind of important, as a few hours after the race, Di Grassi was disqualified for his car being 1.2 kg underweight, potentially due to the rubber he lost from his victory donuts. As a result though, Jerome D'Ambrosio scored his second FE victory in what is still to this day the closest margin of victory in the series history. You know, if I had a nickel for every time Di Grassi cruised off to take a commanding win, only to get disqualified and give the victory to Jerome D'Ambrosio ahead of Sebastian Buemi, I'd have 2 nickels. With his closest rival disqualified, Buemi now stretched his lead to 22 points. Race 6 would take Formula E back to Long Beach for the final time. Da Costa would take his first pole position until he was disqualified for illegal tire pressures. Honestly, bro had to be the unluckiest driver this year. As a result, Bird took pole and led Di Grassi in the opening stages. Buemi started P8 and slowly worked his way forward, but in trying to take P4, he clobbered the back of Robin Frein, spinning the Andretti around and breaking his front wing. Both cars were shown the meatball flag and had to pit well before their pit stop window. Just afterward, Di Grassi was finally able to make it past Bird for the lead. Most cars pitted on lap 22, and Bird, pushing to catch Di Grassi, locked up his cold brakes and hit the barriers, falling to P7. With the Virgin out of the way, Di Grassi looked to cruise away to another easy win when PK tripped over a curb and brought out the safety car. It wouldn't matter much though, as with an energy advantage, Di Grassi would pull away to take redemption for the previous race, just ahead of an impressive P2 by Sarrazin and Abt, making it an Audi double podium. With Buemi's non-score, Di Grassi was able to take the championship lead by just a single point with 4 races to go. Season 2 would see Effie's first visit to Paris. Geraint was replaced by the man, the myth, Ma Qinghua, and Sam Bird would take yet another pole over Di Grassi, with Buemi struggling to again qualify P8. As the lights went out though, a ton of wheel spin by the Virgin allowed Di Grassi to sweep through into the lead, followed by Verne. There was a brief full course yellow for Duval breaking down, but afterwards, Buemi had a lot of trouble getting past the next EV of Turvey, losing a ton of time to the leaders. Just before the stops though, the Virgins began battling for P2, allowing the Renaults to close in, with Prost letting Buemi past. After the stops, it was a bit of a stalemate till Bird locked up and had to flick spin it. Then Ma crashed, and unlike Long Beach, there wouldn't be enough time to clean it, ending the race under the safety car and gifting Di Grassi his second consecutive win over Verne and Buemi, allowing him to extend his lead to 11 points. Round 8 would take place in Berlin, but for the first and only time, not at Tempelhof Airport, as it was being used at the time as a camp for refugees. Instead, a quick little street circuit was drawn up in downtown Berlin and we were good to go. Da Costa would be out due to DTM commitments, instead replaced, ironically, by Rene Rast. Verne would follow his podium with a pole position with Buemi in P2 and Di Grassi P8, but as turn 1 was a tight left-hand hairpin, Buemi easily took the lead with Di Grassi jumping into P6. Verne wasn't going to lie down though, retaking the top spot on lap 2, but Buemi countered with a tight late braking move on lap 6. The meatball flag definitely got a workout during this race. Rast, Turvey, even Sam Bird from P4, which was definitely borderline. But maybe that penalty was for the best, as on lap 21, Verne lost a bit of his front wing on the curb, and a few laps later, it collapsed completely on him, bringing out a full course yellow after the pit stops. Again, it was the case of leader, in this case Buemi, running away with it with a few good battles throughout the field, then a late race safety car with Duval crashing out. This time, we got a restart with 2 to go, with Audi telling P2 Abt to let Di Grassi by, but either Abt didn't find a clean spot to do it, or just refused to, allowing Buemi to win with the Audis completing the podium. As a result, Di Grassi's lead was trimmed down to just 1 point going into the final 2 races in London. And on the team side, it was still wide open between Renault and Abt, with an 11-point gap. In the midst of some legal challenges, Formula E would visit Battersea Park for the final time to crown its Season 2 champion, and in classic London fashion, rain would play a pivotal role in qualifying. The earlier qualifying groups were able to set faster lap times, but with 2 red flags before either Degrassi or Buemi had made a run, it was inevitable that their times would be substantially slower, with Degrassi 11th and Buemi 14th. The other Renault and Prost took pole and sped away, but the real action was with the title contenders, with both able to make up places off the start. By lap 5, both were into the points, with Degrassi in P7 and Buemi in P9, with the other Audi and App between them. App did his best Berlin Wall impression, defending so drastically he got a warning for moving under braking. All of them made it past an overconsuming bird, and on lap 16, Buemi finally made his way past App for P7. After the pit cycle, both made their way past Friends for P5 and P6, just before the Dutchman collided with App, bringing out the safety car. With the field bunched back up, Prost had to fend off Senna up front, as behind them, Degrassi made an ambitious move on Verne for P4 that almost lost him the spot to Buemi and broke part of his front wing. This allowed Bird to reel them in and pass Buemi just as poor Oliver Turvey binned it from P3. Up front though, Nico Prost would take a dominant victory ahead of Bruno Senna, the first Prost-Senna 1-2 since 1993, as behind, Bird ran out of energy, almost taking out Buemi, with the Swiss driver coming home P5 just behind Degrassi in P4. And so, for the second year in a row, the championship would go down to the final race, with the top 2 basically level on points, with Degrassi just ahead by 3 over Buemi. But that buffer would evaporate almost immediately. With qualifying being run under dry conditions, there was no stopping the raw pace of the Renaults, with Buemi taking pole ahead of Prost and crucially scoring the 3 points to now put him level with Degrassi, who would start P3 directly behind Buemi on the right side of the grid. So it was a tied race. Both drivers were level on wins and even on second place finishes. The tiebreaker, if neither scored, would be Degrassi's 2 third-place finishes to Buemi's 1. They had both run incredible seasons, with Buemi scoring points in every round and Degrassi finishing top 10 in all but Mexico. Both were deserving champions in their own right. Now, all that would separate one of them with their trophy would be 33 laps. Or so we thought.
It's the championship decider in the second round of FIA Formula E. We go green in London. It's a very good start from Degrassi. Is he going to be able to pull alongside and try and attack Nico Prost on the run down to turn 1? He's not quite able to do so. Tucks in behind Nico Prost. How aggressive is he going to be? Coming down into turn 3, into the left-hander. He goes side by side. Oh, he hits him. I don't believe it. The 2 championship contenders out at turn 1. And that means Degrassi would win the championship on countback.
What the he did?
Tu restes calme. On avait prévu qu'il pouvait faire ça, on pensait pas qu'il était aussi fou que ça.
They break so early there.
In one of the most controversial moments in FE history, Degrassi's Audi rammed into the back of Buemi's Renault, taking both drivers out of the race less than 15 seconds in. Some still debate to this day if Degrassi did this intentionally, hoping to win the title on countback, or if it was just the case of him misjudging how early Buemi would break in front of him. Either way, with both of their cars destroyed, there was only one thing the title contenders could do now: pull into the pits, strap into their second cars, and send them around the track in a desperate attempt to win fastest lap, and the 2 bonus points that come with it. Renault and Audi set up their cars to qualifying spec, and as the race went back green, the fight for the fastest lap was on. Degrassi was the first to make his timed run, setting a 1 minute 24.0, but during his second lap, Bird brought out the safety car discarding the run. Degrassi then pulled it in, saving his energy for later. On lap 12, Buemi emerged, hoping to make a run at it, but just a lap later, Franz brought out the safety car and Buemi came back in. After they went green, both came back out. But Buemi would be unable to set a good lap, as he was too close to Degrassi, with some claiming the Brazilian was intentionally slowing down to prevent him from doing so. On lap 23, Buemi set a 1 minute 24.5, 3 tenths faster than Degrassi's current best. By lap 25, both had pulled it back in, preparing for one last shot at it in the closing laps. Degrassi came back out with his final run and looked to be setting an incredible lap, going purple in the first 2 sectors. But as he crossed the line, it was a 1 minute 24.6, a tenth too slow. Out of usable energy, Degrassi would admit defeat, as Buemi would rocket across the line and set a 1 minute 24.150, an incredible lap that would go uncontested. And so, as Nicolas Prost scored a lights to flag victory, sweeping the weekend ahead of Abt and D'Ambrosio, teammate Sebastian Buemi would pull it into the pits and win the 2015-16 Formula E Drivers' Championship in the most Formula E way possible. In the end, it was 2 points that separated the top drivers, with the late season charge allowing Prost to take P3 in the standings and aid in Renault E-Dame's second consecutive team's title. No matter your opinion on the way it all unfolded, this title fight was one of the best. Buemi and Degrassi were both at the top of their game and had insane seasons. And the best part is that their saga is far from over. These two really were the Prost and Senna, or the Hamilton and Verstappen of Formula E's early days. In terms of racing, it was a bit of a step up from Season 1, and it only gets better from here. Very quickly, here are my awards for this season, something I'd like to do for all the ones coming up, and well, thank you all for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.